As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History.
As we count down to America's 250th birthday this summer, we are highlighting our We the People series, the people, places, and things of the past that have shaped our country into what it is today. Here's Charlie Shortino with This Day in History.
Hello again on this day, February 28th, back in 1854. A meeting was held in Ripon, Wisconsin, the first of two that would lead to the naming of the Republican Party. The first meeting was held at the Congregational Church on this day in 1854, and it included women. At that meeting, they decided in the event the Kansas-Nebraska bill was adopted, old political parties should be cast aside and an entirely new organization should be established. The Republican Party was officially founded just under a month later on March 20th. The party quickly gained popularity here in Wisconsin, securing the governorship in 1856 and remaining the dominant party for many years. The first Republican president to get elected, Abraham Lincoln, 4 years after that, in 1860. Since the party's founding, 18 of the 28 presidents have been Republicans. That's This Day in History for February 28th. For We the People, I'm Charlie Shortino.